Hello, YouTubers. This is a new session where I get to interview and have a little podcast and little powwow with people from all over the world. Amazing people, inspirational people that inspired me personally, and they are, making huge impact in the tech industry today. With the technologies that they create. Today, I have with me, the one and only Mr. Daniel Roth. Just a quick introduction
Hello.
for you. If you know about Blazor, you probably heard about a lot about Daniel Roth. Daniel Roth is a principal program manager at Microsoft. Is it principal, right? Is that principal
That
engineer,
is correct.
program
Yes.
manager? He's the mind behind driving a lot of the features that are going on in Blazor. Really our attempt, at Microsoft to pull C sharp into the browser and run it in the browser and make it so simple for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of engineers out there to be able to use their C sharp knowledge to build, responsive, interactive UI applications. So without any further ado, hello, sir. How are you doing today?
Hello, Hassan. I'm great. Thank you for having me on the show. It's great to
Uh,
be here.
I am very happy to see you today. Always, I have to tell you, I have a huge respect for you, sir, and I appreciate what you do with Steve Sanderson and the rest of the ASP.NET team. You guys are amazing, and I wanted to kind of tell the world this podcast. I know every time you see Daniel Roth, he's talking about new capabilities, no features, the next big thing. Today we're gonna talk a little bit more about who's Daniel Roth. Who is he? Who's that guy? He's a nice guy.
Boring stuff.
He has this amazing smile that is super addictive. But who is he? Do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself, Daniel? Where are you from? Where are you originally from? Tell me.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm from the Northeast of the
Mhm.
United States. I
Nice.
grew up in Massachusetts. So I'm a New Englander. Any New Englanders out there? Hello. Yeah, I grew up in Western Massachusetts with my family.
Nice.
I've always enjoyed the greenery of that region, and so I've always kind of thought I'd either live in the Northeast or the Northwest of the United States, where you have lots of trees and fall foliage and
Corridors.
those
You're
types of
big on
things.
corridors. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so now I'm
Uh-huh.
actually on the West Coast. I'm in the Redmond, Seattle area. Been working at Microsoft since I came out of college.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love software. I love computers. I've always had sort of an interest in AI and machine
Nice.
learning and robotics. I tried to go that route actually early out of college. I
Uh-huh.
remember going onto there was the internet back in those days, and I remember going
Right.
onto web pages looking for companies that worked in robotics, and I
Uh-huh.
found like a listing of one. And I remember clicking through to all their web pages, and pretty much all these companies had gone like bankrupt and were no longer existed
You've
anymore.
been
And
a, you've been a
it was
good
kind of
choice
a
there.
that whole industry kind of goes in waves, and it was a kind of a low point in that for the industry at that point.
So
Now it's booming.
yeah, so you graduated right out of college, you joined Microsoft.
And I went right to Microsoft. That's
You're
right.
you're what I call Microsoft native. They didn't go anywhere else. Right out of college.
I'll tell you a little secret, Hassan. Like this is one of
Uh,
those things that I always feel, a little lacking. I work on .NET framework and tools and languages and frameworks for developers to write great software, and I do have that imposter syndrome where I'm telling you, like, I think this is how you should do it. Like this is how I'm told. It makes sense to me, but yeah, I don't have that. I don't have a deep industry background coming to software development, and I know sometimes people in our community look at .NET folks on the .NET team and wonder, like, do they really have experience building apps? And we try, like, we do build things. To some extent, framework design and development is a specialized skill set in of itself relative to like actually then taking those things and going and building apps like you do, going and
right.
setting up actual applications. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't actually have that deep background, so I rely heavily on talking to people like you, talking to people in the community, to customers, to hear what pain do they have, what things are hard, and I love having those conversations.
Yeah.
That's how that's what I bring back to the team when we're talking about like what should Blazor do next, what should ASP.NET Core do next. I use
Yeah.
those stories.
Yeah, I never had a conversation with you once without learning something new, and I really appreciate your openness for engagement with anybody, really, from everywhere. You're very active. Daniel's very active on Twitter. Follow his Twitter handle. He's I'm gonna share all these details about Daniel. But so you joined Microsoft. How long have you been at Microsoft, Dan?
Oh man, I have been at Microsoft now. I think I was discussing this with my wife recently. I think it's 17 years now that we've been at
Nice,
Microsoft. Yeah,
nice.
it's been
This is
great. I mean,
so
it's
so you saw the whole
fantastic
thing
ride.
evolve. So so
Yeah,
so so here's a question for you. How did you end up in Blazor? How did that happen? Tell me.
I've worked in .NET pretty much the entire time I've been at Microsoft. It was
Nice,
.NET 2, .NET Framework
nice,
2 when I
nice.
joined. So they had just
2002,
Script
something like that.
1.1,
Yep.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
back in
Uh-huh.
those days. I went through the whole transition from being a closed source, a tech that's really part of Windows,
Proprietary.
moving
Yeah.
to being an out of band, open source, community driven project, which was super fun. Like that was just, oh man, the
I
those
love the
days when we made
community.
those first open source check-ins, sharing the code was just super exciting. Blazor itself, I mean, as we later in those years, I started working more on web development on ASP.NET. Earlier on, I was more in the back end, like on services and
Yep.
SOAP stuff like XML,
Yep.
pointy anchor brackets that you
WCF.
could print yourself on, stuff like that. And
Run
my
at run at server, Daniel. Run
Yeah,
at
yeah.
server.
Well, that's yeah. Those are the early days of .NET web development,
Yep.
and
Yep.
as I was looking at that, it was there was the move towards the client. More people were writing JavaScript Ajax style patterns. I mean, the browser was becoming
jQuery.
more and more
Yeah.
capable, and you could leverage the client machine to do more and more things, and so you could see that shift happening, and more people writing JavaScript logic in their applications to make them more interactive and rich. We did some things in that space, like the ASP.NET Ajax libraries and so forth. And then you had JavaScript pop up on the server, right? You got Node and I still remember actually those early days where the .NET folks were looking at that and being like, JavaScript on the server, is that for real? Like, is that really going to be a thing? And yeah, it turned into a thing. And it seemed like if .NET developers were stuck in this sort of tricky spot, like, well,
Uh-huh.
.NET was great for backend services, server rendered HTML, web applications. But if you wanted to do anything on the client, the only language that browsers could speak was
Is
JavaScript.
JavaScript
So you had to know
like
both.
Monopoly?
Yeah, you need
Yeah.
to do both. You're straddling these two ecosystems, which for some
Right.
devs, I'm sure for
Right.
you, like that's no
Yeah.
problem. Like I can learn do JavaScript, I can do TypeScript, I can do Rust, I can go, I can do
Yep.
anything. Sure, that's
Yep.
fine.
Yep.
But I think for a lot of people, that's a heavy burden
An
to
impediment, an
carry.
impediment. And a
Um,
lot of people, Daniel, a lot of people, I think, do you feel like TypeScript was a side effect of that? Like some way we are, maybe Halsberg was trying to make JavaScript appealing to the C sharp community or the community of backend engineers who want to, we could ask him the question, but I feel like TypeScript came in to kind of add a little bit of alleviate some of the pain that's in JavaScript. I know even Angular, folks. Angular is developed by Google, folks, and Angular 1 was fully written by JavaScript. Angular 2 was completely rewritten by TypeScript,
yeah.
right? Because of this, ambiguity, typeless, no types. People who are born into JavaScript, they love it. They be like, okay, you're building tubes and the data is going through these tubes. So it fits, it fits. If it says name and there's a name coming in, it works.
There's no square pegs and round holes. It's all just round holes. Like it
It's
just
just
just,
all right.
just round pegs, round holes. Right? Yeah.
And then my question was for folks that use JavaScript, is that okay? How do you know, during development time that you're saying, person.name equal Daniel, right? How do you know that name actually exists in this object? They said unit test. You got to run the test. I said, but development time, the turnaround time, the engineering experience is a little difficult there. This is where TypeScript and then now with Blazor comes in and makes things much much simpler. And I'll tell you a little bit. I saw a time where we tried to do things with. Do you remember Silverlight?
I have
Silverlight
heard of that. I've had a few people mention to me about
action
Silverlight,
script.
often
We
in the
tr-
context of Blazor.
there
Yeah.
was a lot. There was a lot of attempts, but what makes this very special is that you're not really creating a new language. you're opening an opportunity for existing language. You're building on top of the amazing C sharp, legacy to actually open yet another door. I gotta tell you this, Blazor makes C sharp one of the most powerful languages ever. I'm going to show you something here just so you understand. And this is you. This is all your work and all the work of the .NET team. You know, I was looking the other day at this website here, right? This is a website, and then programming languages ranks, right? So for every programming language, you'll see some ranks going on. You're looking at the ranks, and it's basically giving you a little bit of not even this one. Hold on, yeah, it's probably this one. Nope, not this one either. There's a rank out there. I don't know where it went. It would show you like where every programming language is actually being used, and C sharp of one of the only language. Yeah, there it is. There it is, Daniel. So there it is. So watch this. Every language is lacking in some field, right? Like this is, the IoT, device, desktop applications, mobile application, web applications, right? Look at C sharp.
Do anything with
You
.NET.
can literally do anything. And by the way, like I'm gonna scroll down for all of them. You won't find any that have that except for C sharp.
And
That's
that's
how.
not even enough. That's not enough icons. Like if you've ever seen a .NET, like Scott Hunter will do keynote presentations for our .NET conferences, and he'll have this slide where he'll have like, yeah, sure, desktop, web, mobile, IoT, but what about games? What about
Yep.
AI?
Yep.
What
Yep.
about like big data, like pretty much any type of app that you want to build, .NET can be used for that purpose. So it's a very reusable skill set. The JavaScript line there, I would argue, that's probably a little bit like you can build mobile apps with
Now you can, and
yeah.
and
It's
some
maybe a little
people.
dated on that one, but so JavaScript
Yep.
is also very pervasive, and honestly, that was one of the issues, right? Like, well,
Mhm.
if JavaScript's the only language you can write in the browser, and it's starting to go to server and go everywhere,
Yeah.
then if you're a .NET dev, does that mean you should just go learn JavaScript because eventually everything's going to be JavaScript? When the browsers and the open web community
Mhm.
came together and said, you know what, we really should do something better here with the web platform.
Mhm.
Let's define a like low level instruction language
Mhm.
that really, as long as you can compile your language to that instruction language, you're good. That was WebAssembly. That really then opened the door
Yep.
for the web platform to be a target for really any development
Yep.
platform. And now you have choice. Like now you can use your .NET skill sets to go to web in addition to all those other places. If you're a JavaScript dev, you can do the same thing, and that's perfectly great. Actually, I know a lot of people are not big fans of JavaScript. I think there's actually a lot to like about JavaScript. I'm not a JavaScript hater actually at
I
heart. Like,
know. I
no
always tell
surprises.
people that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. I always tell people, please don't put it like, Blazor versus React or JavaScript versus C sharp. Do you remember the one time I came to your office and I asked you a question? I said, I don't want people to think, oh, here is this against this, right? And by the way, that same mindset is what Phil Spencer does with in the gaming industry. He said, I don't like this console wars, PlayStation versus Xbox or any of that. I love that mindset because you're basically saying they can actually interop. You can actually build a Blazor component and you can add it on top of JavaScript components. You can run it within React. My buddy Josh McCall was doing a demo for that the other day. I'll share that with you as well. It's really cool, that you can actually embed Blazor components, especially with WASM now, in the back end or sorry, in an existing component that's React. That's in the enterprise world. That's gold, brother.
Yeah, that's
That's
new in
more.
.NET 6, the abilities to take Blazor components and use them really with any front end JavaScript framework. You can embed Blazor components in an Angular app and a React app. We have a new package that basically allows you to take a Blazor component and shrink wrap it in a standards based custom
Uh-huh.
HTML element, and then you can use it
Nice.
wherever.
Nice. Okay, so let me ask you this. Okay, how did Blazor come to
Yeah.
existence, like the
Well,
inception of Blazor?
Well, that
Hmm.
hopefully gives a little context on how we were
Yes,
thinking about things. And
yes,
so we were
yes.
trying to find a way, well, how could we bring .NET to
Uh-huh.
client-side web development? How can we enable full stack web development with .NET using your C# skills, the tools you know and love, the frameworks and libraries that you know? WebAssembly really was a big step that opened the door there.
Uh-huh.
So we were talking about these things, but a lot of credit has to go to Mr. Sanderson, Steve
Steve
Sanderson.
Sanderson.
He's an
Yeah.
architect on the ASP.NET team. Fantastic speaker if you haven't had a chance to hear some of his talks. But
Yeah.
he did a talk in 2017.
Uh-huh.
It was at NDC Oslo, I believe, where
Yeah.
he was just talking about new capabilities of the browser. He was talking about
Yeah.
things that browsers can do that you may not know about. And one of the things he decided to mention
Yeah.
was WebAssembly. He was talking about WebAssembly, and he was trying to think, well, what demo could I do? And he thought,
Uh-huh.
oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could take some C# code, pilot to WebAssembly, and get it running in a browser? And he
Nice.
found it wasn't actually a Microsoft .NET runtime that he used. He found a .NET runtime, an
Mono. Was
IL
it mono?
interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
No, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't Mono either. It was .NET Anywhere. I think it was. Man, I've forgotten now. I think it was DNA was the name of the
Uh-huh.
project. It
Uh-huh.
was actually a .NET IL interpreter written by, I think it was someone at Google, and it was all
Nice.
in plain C. And it was
Nice.
just sitting on GitHub, and I don't think it had been touched in like a number of years. But Steve found it, grabbed the code, and there are tool chains that you can use to take C code, C++ code, and compile it to WebAssembly. So he compiled that thing to WebAssembly, used it to then run a simple .NET assembly in the browser that could do like "Hello World," and he's like, "Boom, yeah,
That's
.NET
it.
code now
That's
running in
it.
the browser." And that was now
Uh-huh.
most people would have been like, "That is an epic demo. Like no one has
Yeah.
done that before," and would have stopped there. But
Yeah.
Steve was like, Steve is very he's very plugged into actually the JavaScript community and
Yeah.
the web community. He wrote Knockout JS, which is a fairly popular
Nice.
JavaScript framework. Very
Oh,
familiar with React and Angular.
he invented Knockout JS. He
Yeah,
wrote that.
he's the author of Knockout JS.
Oh my
Yeah,
God. I
we
didn't
shipped
even.
that for a while in our ASP.NET templates because it was good. It was a good
What?
binding layer. He
Okay.
he knew about that stuff, but he's like, well, maybe I can build a simple web framework, like a component model on
Uh-huh.
top of what I built here. And so that's where the initial Blazor framework then came from. And he named it Blazor. He'll tell you that he named it Blazor because it was browser plus Razor, which was the syntax he used for the components.
But
Razor is
where's
like,
the L?
yeah, where the L come from? And he'll joke and say, oh, well, blockchain, right? Like, no, he just thought it sounded better with
Right.
the L in there, so he stuck the L in there.
Uh-huh.
So that's he wrote a little framework, which was super cool. So he could do components and like handle events and clicks and counters and to-do lists and so forth. And
Yeah.
again, you would think that's man. Now it's like not just an epic demo; it's like a super epic demo. But then he
Yeah.
went and plugged into Visual Studio's tooling for Razor syntax to actually enable like completions and an editing
Nice.
experience around these Blazor components in Razor and hack that together.
Yeah.
And that was his demo. So then he went on stage and showed this. He showed it to also a couple of other architects and folks
Yeah.
on the .NET team.
Yeah.
David Fowler,
Yep. David.
Damian
Yep.
Edwards were there
Yeah.
at the conference. And he was like, here, let me show you this thing I'm going to demo for my talk. And they were
Yeah.
like,
What?
like
see, David Fowler, in and of himself, he's one of the creators of the ASP.NET Core, if not the creator of
yeah.
ASP.NET. If you can blow this guy's mind, you probably hit some level. He's actually a very humble, cool guy. I saw a lot of his videos and stuff. He's a really cool guy, but it's really so okay. So let's go back to this. So Steve Sanderson. This is the inception of Blazor, you guys. So you know the history because Blazor, as God is my witness, I'm gonna take Blazor everywhere. They say don't give a preacher a microphone. I got a microphone here, and you saw while we were recording, I ran out of the battery on one. I got a second one right here. Don't worry, I'll never run out of juice to talk about Blazor. Okay,
so a drawer full of microphones to talk about Blazor.
And there's one in the back, and I'm ready, right? So okay. So Steve Sanderson made the demo. He went on this NDC in Oslo. He made the demo, and then he started hacking together some stuff. This is an engineer just playing, just trying to try things out and see how far he can take an idea. Okay.
That's what it was.
So this is, by the way, I
Yeah.
think that's how most of the greatest things ever start. If someone plays with an idea and then it turns out to be, and thanks to open source GitHub and open source community, you put it out there, you find all the crazies out there that want to actually do the exact same thing that you're doing, and be like, you know what, this is actually a great idea. Let me take it to the next level and the next level. I'm starting to experience that firsthand with some of the projects that I put out there in the open source community. People come back and they say, hey, what do you think about this idea? What do you think about that idea? I'm like, This is great. This is beyond great. So let me ask you this. Okay, he demoed it, mind blowing. How did Daniel come
Now
into
what
play?
happened? Yeah. So
Yeah.
you would think that like what you might imagine that he showed that demo and everyone was like, "Great, let's ship it," and that is not what happened.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Let's see.
um, it took actually quite a bit of time and effort and study to figure out like, well, is this something that we really should turn into something real? Because it wasn't. I mean, really wasn't obvious. Like, could something like this really compete with these very established, very well
Mm-hmm.
funded JavaScript-based frameworks like
Yeah.
Angular and React? Those all existed. They
Yep.
were there. They had communities.
Yep.
Could Blazor really find a place? And so we actually spent quite a bit of time, like a good 6 months initially, just internally at Microsoft, showing the Blazor prototype to customers, both
Nice.
.NET and non-.NET, getting their
Nice.
reactions to this. Like, is
Mhm.
this appealing? Do you like this?
Yeah.
And one of the really fun things was the number of people that were completely new to .NET that we showed it to that were really excited about it. They're like, wow, I
Nice.
would drop. I remember one guy who was like working on some sort of e-learning platform that he was funding as like a startup, and he was like, I'm ready to rewrite my app
Yep.
in this thing, and we had to
Yep.
tell him like, no, it's just a prototype. Like, you can't like build anything real with this
Not
yet.
ready yet. Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
So we did that. We got enough support and data to then take that and make it into a public experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't even public yet. The
Yep.
Blazor became a public thing in, I think it was February of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it
Mm-hmm.
became an experimental release. This wasn't even a
Okay.
new concept.
Yeah.
Not even preview yet. We were going to
Just
try it out and see
experimental.
if people
Just
publicly liked it. Yeah.
tasting the water, just see what. Yep. Okay. Got it.
So we
And
did
how
that
and
for
how
a
how was
while.
the feedback to that? Like when you put it out there?
It was so much fun. Like, it
Yep.
was so
Yep.
gratifying.
Yep.
There were a lot, because for a lot of people, this was really enabling. And I felt this as well. Like, I still remember the first time I sat in front of Blazor, like the early prototypes, and writing, my first like to-do list app using that model, C Sharp,
Yep.
.NET, in
Yep.
Visual Studio, and feeling like, wow, like I feel I can now be a client-side web developer. Like, I knew some JavaScript, but it
Yeah.
certainly wasn't my native tongue, right? Like, it wasn't my
Yeah.
forte. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
well versed in the JavaScript ecosystem. I'm not like a professional JavaScript dev, but I
Yep.
use C Sharp and .NET, and this was so enabling. And as we showed it to people, that was one of the big themes we heard. Is like, this is enabling me to do things that I don't really feel like I could do otherwise.
Yep.
So that was
Yep.
super cool. And then there was also the people who were like, even though I don't know .NET, I feel
I
like
I will go
the
for it.
story, the
Yeah.
C Sharp, this whole experience is
Yeah.
pretty compelling.
The,
So we did
mhm,
experimental
mhm.
releases for a while
Uh-huh.
and gathered, data on like how many people are using it, what are they saying about it. We did surveys and all that stuff until finally we got the green light to turn it into product. And I think we did. There was also a time where Blazor Server got birthed, got invented. The original prototype was WebAssembly based.
So
Uh,
that's what you guys were going for, and then
yeah,
that server. Wow, I thought server came first,
no,
and
no. Blazor Server was shipped first
uh-huh.
because Blazor WebAssembly relies on a WebAssembly-based .NET runtime. They required a completely new bring up of the runtime. Their
Yeah.
initial prototype was based off of that GitHub project that
Yeah.
we ran through the Emscripten toolchain and had got, poof, there's a runtime. But it wasn't, didn't have the completeness and the quality that you would expect from a Microsoft shipped and supported .NET runtime. So
Yeah.
that we spent a lot of time figuring out how are we going to bring up .NET support on WebAssembly just in general.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
involve collaborations with folks on the Mono team and the .NET Runtimes team, and it became apparent that was going to take a little longer. Like, it's going to take some
Hmm.
time to bake
Hmm.
that thing.
Yep.
But because of the way Blazor's rendering works, um, we had this idea. Well, actually, we could get away with just still running the components on the server
Yeah.
and tunneling the UI updates and handling the UI events over like a WebSocket connection using something like SignalR,
Yep. Yep.
because the rendering is decoupled from where the code is actually executed.
Yep. Yep.
And that's how Blazor Server came to be. And that was actually easier for us to ship because the runtime was already done.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's a pretty compelling story too, because
Yep.
once you're on the server, you
Yep.
don't need to stand up HTTP APIs. You can just talk to your databases. You're in the
Just
server
running.
environment
Yeah.
already,
Yeah.
which makes things a bunch of things much, much, much simpler. So that
Yep.
came in. That was .NET Core 3.0 actually
Yeah.
when Blazor Server first shipped. I think that was
3.5 or
September
okay.
2019.
Okay, yeah. 2019 is when I started using the server side. Was right out of the oven, But yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah.
And then
And then
Last,
again, it shipped
go
with
ahead.
.NET Core 3.1 later that year. Like there was another
Uh,
follow-on update, which was like the long-term support release. So Blazor Server has been had a long-term supported release since the end of 2019. Blazor WebAssembly took a little longer. I think it
mhm.
was like build like May of the following year when we finally shipped got the runtime done and was able to ship Blazor WebAssembly. And now
Nice.
it's just part of .NET. Like it ships as part of
It's
.NET
out
5.
there.
We just shipped it in .NET 6, which is our most recent long-term support release. It's part of ASP.NET Core, which is our modern web framework for doing web development with .NET from server to client. And it's one cohesive story. So
Even the database now, Daniel, like if you're using the Entity framework, you don't have to know SQL. So you're basically provisioning and building your data layer. You're writing your core logic layer in C sharp. You're building your data layer in C sharp, and now you're building your exposure components, your UI and APIs and everything in C sharp, and it's very, very powerful. Let me ask you this. A lot of people ask me this question all the time. So they're like, okay, when do I use server side? And when you probably got asked this question only 20 million times, but you know,
good
I'll
question.
I'll tell you my theory, and you tell me your truth, right? So I always tell people it depends on your application. If you expect to build, if you expect your client to sit for a while in front of the application, like when you're doing docs, you're editing a document. So you're building an application where someone's going to fill in a document. You don't have to actually make it a server side. Make it client side, so in case they lose connection with the server, they still can edit, and you can save that data in the browser until the browser comes back in connection with the server. That's one theory I have. And then in the server side is when I go and say, okay, if you are in intranet or reliable network and there's a lot of work happening behind the scene, and you don't want to put too much out there on the client side because there's a lot of heavy lifting going on the UI, maybe the server would be a better option. I'm pretty sure you probably have a better rule for it. A lot of people, a lot of people come to me that, I wish I could show you like how many people around the world are super excited about Blazor, especially, in Europe, all the way over in Europe and, Australia, all over the world. I see people coming and saying, okay, we're going to adapt this web technology. How does it work, right?
Yeah,
What's your theory about this? When do we decide, and go as detailed as you want.
sure.
I gotcha. Go ahead.
I think you hit a number of the important trade-offs. Like it is trade-offs. They have different strengths and they have different limitations, and
Mhm.
you do need to fit those to your application workload. In
Mhm.
general, I actually point people to Blazor Server typically first because it's
Yep.
architecturally simpler. You have one
Easier.
project.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
little
yeah.
easier. You're running on the server already, so you don't have to learn about how the browser is going to talk to the server and how you're going to move data back and forth. It's a normal .NET runtime that you've probably been using for a long, long time if you've been doing ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core development. So that'll feel natural.
Yep.
So Blazor Server is simpler in many ways because it's just
Mhm.
that one process. Blazor Server is also nice for the code's going to run on the server, so you're gonna actually run the user's UI on your server.
Uh-huh.
So you're
Uh-huh.
offloading work from the client to the server. If you have a very
Yep.
thin client that doesn't have like much compute or memory or
Yep.
resources to leverage, and you
Yep.
want to actually offload it, then putting it on the server is a great option. So thin clients work really
Yep.
well.
Yep.
The startup time, like the load time of the app, will also be really snappy with Blazor Server because there's not much to download. Like you're going to
Yep.
download a little bit of JavaScript that we give you
That's
that
it.
sets up that connection back to the server, and that's really it. All of
That's
the
it.
rest of your
Uh-huh.
code stays server
Uh-huh.
side.
Uh-huh.
Some people also really care about the fact that their code doesn't leave the server. If you're a .NET dev, you may not be as comfortable or familiar with the idea of shipping your code down to the
The
user's machine.
uglification and yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
like, oh, do I have to obfuscate it? Like, wait, they can see my code? Like they can see what's there? Yeah, they can, because it's basically public code once it goes down to the browser. That's the way it is with JavaScript, and that's the way it is
With
effectively
any
with
web
Blazor.
application. Yeah, yeah.
You can try to do
Yeah.
obfuscation techniques, but just like you could with like desktop and native apps. But yeah, you do need to think about that. So if you have IP in a
Mhm.
in a in a
In the
dependency that you
code.
don't want
Mhm.
to go to the client, then leave it on the server. Just like you would put it behind an API with Blazor Server, you can just leave it there and call into it. So those are the benefits of Blazor Server. The downsides, the things you have to think about is, well, every user that's going to come to your app is going to need that connection. It's going to need to
Yep.
set up a pipe, and there's going to be resources set up on
Y-
the server to handle that user's interaction. We call that a circuit in
Yep.
Blazor
Yep.
server land.
Yep.
And so you have to start worrying about, well, how many circuits, how many users can I simultaneously handle? If you're
Uh-huh.
talking an app that has 100,000, even 10,000 concurrent users, depending on what your app's doing for each of those users, that can be totally fine. Like Blazor server at its core actually scales up quite
Yep.
nicely. Like I think we
Yep.
did some numbers with some Azure VMs, and we could easily handle like 20,000 concurrent circuits
Wow,
at
20,000.
a foundational level.
Yeah.
But again, a lot matters than what are you doing on top of what Blazor server is doing. If you're allocating like a gig of memory for each circuit, then yeah, those numbers aren't going to scale up that way. But you have to start thinking about those scale characteristics. How can I
Hmm.
keep the resource consumption per circuit down? How many concurrent users do I need to be able to handle? If you're talking like I need to handle 1 million concurrent users,
Hmm.
a giant website, you might be paying a lot with your server
Yep.
resources then
Yep.
to handle that
Cost is
load.
gonna. So server side is easy but expensive. Client side is a little bit.
It
uh,
can be expensive if for like large scale out scenarios. For
okay.
most, like honestly, like the vast majority of scenarios I talk to people about, it's
Yeah.
not even an issue. Like it's like, how many people are you gonna? I asked them like, how many people are going to connect to this app concurrently, like at the most, and they say like, well, a
Yeah.
few hundred or 1,000. Like
Yeah.
Blazor server is fine. Like you don't even need to worry about it. If they tell
Yeah.
me I'm doing a software as a service offering and I want to have like hundreds of thousands of tenants with their own hundreds of users per tenant, then
Yeah.
I'd be like, you're going to be paying with Blazor server for all that. Maybe you should think about Blazor
Yeah.
WebAssembly.
Yeah.
You also think
So,
about latency too. Like the Blazor server, the
right.
UI interactions are going over that pipe. Like when you
Yep.
click, it has to go
Yep.
to the server and then come back. So you want those servers close to the users. If you have really interactions that require very low latency, like your drawing app, right? You're going to
Yeah.
drag the
Yeah.
mouse across the screen.
Yeah.
Well, every gesture is going to have to go back and forth with the server. That
Yep.
might not work as well. So if you have those types of interactions, then you're going to want Blazor WebAssembly instead.
So some people, I'm gonna fact check myself right now with you, just to see. So I recommend that sometimes you might end up doing hybrid. Is that even possible?
Yeah, no, it is possible.
Mm.
So, like for any given root component in a Blazor application or in a broader ASP.NET Core app, you can
Mhm.
decide like, no, I want to render this as a Blazor server component or as a Blazor WebAssembly component. So you can
Mhm.
have basically islands of functionality that where
Yep.
some are running on
Yep.
the client and some are running on the server. Hypothetically,
It could
technically,
work.
you could imagine even doing like a transition thing. Like this is not something that's like enabled out of the box, but we've talked about it. Like imagine you started out as a Blazor server
And
interaction,
you want to kind of
and then
switch over.
you transition it to the client if that's appropriate for the whatever client connected to you, or
Hmm.
maybe you do something a little bit more dynamic, like you look at the type of client and you decide,
Uh-huh.
oh, you would be more appropriate as Blazor server, or you would be more appropriate as Blazor WebAssembly. Those
Yep.
ideas are technically feasible, but they're not something we've really done work to enable. But you can certainly upfront decide here this is going to be Blazor server, here this is going to be Blazor WebAssembly, and you could have a mix.
Nice.
The Blazor WebAssembly benefits are primarily, well, now it's a true client-side app. Like you're going to download the runtime in WebAssembly along with the app binaries to the client,
It just
and it's going to run on the client. And once it's there, you could be
magic.
offline and it would be fine. Like
Magic.
it could be
Play
for
a video
further
game in
checking.
the browser. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like a JavaScript app at that
Yep.
point. You don't even need .NET on the server at all. Like you can just
Yeah.
host the whole site as a static site. And we actually
And it
have
just
some nice
runs.
static site hosting solutions
Yeah.
on Azure for this. Azure Static Web Apps has
Yep.
a
Yep.
built-in support for Blazor WebAssembly. You can pair
Nice.
it with a functions backend, a serverless functions backend if you want, but
Yep.
you don't need to. It could just sit as a static site. I've deployed Blazor WebAssembly apps to GitHub pages like that. That works. That's perfectly fine. So you can be
Nice.
offline, static site hosting. You've shifted the load to the client, right? You're going to use the
Fully
client.
functional, running on the browser. So let me ask you this. So you, in the enterprise world, right? What really happens? I'm gonna draw a map for you. I love to draw maps for people. It helps kind of bring my ideas into some shapes, and maybe we can talk a little bit about it. Is that okay? What do you think about that? Do you think that's a good
Okay,
idea?
let's do it.
Okay, so check this out. This is how some enterprise applications actually function. This is an idea for people that are, watching us, in case sometimes Daniel, there is a shell. So you have a shell in here, which is like a portal, right? And now every team every team, let's say you have a bunch of teams. So you have this team here and this team here, and let's say this is a portal across the entire enterprise. And every team want to kind of add a little, tile, their own little app into the dashboard, right?
Yeah.
So this is the micro front ends, kind of approach. People are building their own tiles, and these tiles may be using the authentication mechanism in the shell itself, but then every app goes and talks to its own API, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
it's not owned by, one person, it's owned by a bunch of people. I saw that scenario very commonly. I saw that scenario back when I was working in Iowa. I saw that on the React level. You have all these teams and a bunch of apps talking to a bunch of different APIs. Okay, so can Blazor client side today? So these apps normally, or these components, are hosted in a CDN, just a tiny CDN, that has the app and it knows what to do. It already knows it's integrated. It knows how to talk to the interface of the shell. So it knows how to kind of authenticate and generate its own token. And then the teams responsible basically go and deploy. And when you go on the website, it looks like you are talking to one site, one portal
Yeah.
owned by one team. But in reality, it's team A and team B and team C and team D, and each one of them talking to its own API. Now, how easy would that be to implement today with Blazor client side?
That's a great, great question.
This is real life for you,
No,
Daniel.
I know.
This is the real deal.
So
Go ahead. Go
the
ahead.
micro, I can tell you what I know. I would say
Tell me
there's
what
some
you know.
things in this space that
Hmm.
that I don't have all the answers on. Like
Okay.
sometimes people will come to us actually and asking for full and complete guidance on like, hey, I want to do micro front end. How do I do that in Blazor? And the answer is we don't provide prescriptive guidance today on how to do that. People
Hmm.
absolutely do it. And there are various community blog posts and content out there of people using different strategies for doing
Hmm.
micro front ends with Blazor.
Hmm.
So you can do different things, and I'm not going to try to
Uh-huh.
articulate what strategies they use, but they do certain things.
Yep.
The things that I can tell you that I know are limitations is that
Uh-huh.
if you try to do this with Blazor WebAssembly,
Hmm.
like you might ask, well, can green square A and green square and blue square B, can they be completely self-contained? Like, can they use their own like
Mm.
Blazor WebAssembly version even? Like, can we have like multiple Blazor WebAssembly apps,
Ah.
like even on the same page?
Uh-huh.
And this today with .NET 6 is it has some limitations. Like there's a bunch of
Hmm.
some global state in Blazor that limits like you basically can have one version of Blazor WebAssembly that's on the page. It'll inhabit the global namespace. We're actually doing work in .NET 7 to address that particular limitation, so that you can
Okay.
conceivably have multiple Blazor WebAssembly apps living on the same document, even potentially with different runtime versions, by isolating them in their own ES6 modules and
Hmm.
so forth. So there are some limitations on how you can approach this.
Hmm.
From what I understand, there are perfectly legitimate ways to do it today. You just have to live within those limitations.
And just to let you know, this is like what you just described is beyond what the enterprise world, from my perspective, as far as I know, and I have limited knowledge and experience, that normally when you have that shell, the shell dictates a certain version, right? So when you're trying to send over a component, the shell will say you have to comply by this interface. Like, let's say your component, for instance, wants to communicate notifications, right? That shell normally has an interface that allows this component to hit that notification interface, so it can actually start displaying notifications from that particular shell. So what you just talked about, that's beyond the dream. Like, the dream is to be able to do that. The beyond the dream, to be able to roll out your own version. And we don't have to do iframes, do we? I hope not. I'm just joking with you. I'm
Well,
just teasing
if
you.
you need that version isolation, like I know we've had conversations with some customers that actually do want that level of flexibility, and that was
Wow.
one way they could do it. Yeah, it's not pretty, which is one of the reasons why we want to do some work in .NET 7 in
Yes.
this space. There's a blog post by Whale Kudo.
That's
I think
Do you
I'm
have the
pronouncing his
link?
name right.
Do you have it?
Wael. I'll put
Huh.
in the chat for you. You can share it, where he
Let's
looked
see.
at micro front end patterns with Blazor that I would point people to. He's worked with various. He was at Microsoft, worked with various folks that are looking to use Blazor for micro front end patterns, and he suggests some different ways that you could approach this problem in that blog post.
Oh, nice. So micro front ends. Uh, Wa'il. Okay, so this is an approach. Oh, that's exactly what we were talking about. That's exactly it. You have a modular distributed web applications, and people are just kind of sharing common capabilities and sending. That's exactly it. That's beautiful. That's exactly. Wow. Okay. Okay. And then this is a session to show how this works, and this is Wail's approach to the. Nice. I love it. That's exactly it. That's it, Daniel. That's what people are leaning into today. Like
Yeah.
we went from do you remember we had a monolith, and then we went to service oriented architecture, and then microservices architecture, and then we went into femto services or serverless architecture, where you have a bunch of functions that sleep, and when you need them they wake up, they do the work, and then they go to sleep again. And now people are talking about micro front ends, so every single one of these little components talks to its own Lambda or Azure function, and then it does its work. That's where the world basically is headed now, in terms of you can see that it keeps getting more modular, cheaper, easier. It comes with a cost in terms of infrastructure, but it also comes with a lot of joy in terms of onboarding new engineers and having them hit the ground running from day one, in terms of contributing to the code base. And I'll tell you something from my experience. Like internally at Microsoft, I work with multiple teams. I build Blazor based applications. You will be amazed by how within like 1 month time frame, 1 month, even less than that, people are already building UI components. People that never touched UI before, never ever, don't even know, like, they know that there are web applications that can be built, but can I actually build my own component, and where do I start, right? Of course, it helps when we have an engineering standard that tells people, okay, here's how these components work and all that kind of stuff. Thanks for the shout out the other day. I appreciate that. But also, it also helps that the technology itself is helping and supporting, the engineers. And I feel like Blazor, okay, it enabled something that wasn't there, right? You can write C# in the browser. But what's more important than all of this is that it's a huge boost to the engineering experience. Like me doing this for 21 years now, I can tell you this right now. I have yet to see, like, for people watching us, if you're on entry level or you're starting in the tech industry, this is the golden age, of software engineering, especially if you're in the .NET ecosystem, because you can build anything. Like I remember, Daniel, do you remember you had to compile your own, framework just to run? I remember VS. Do you remember VS? What was it, 2006 and VS 10? And before that, there was even the original. There's no IntelliSense. There is no. It was really early stage, and it
And there
also.
were dinosaurs, and there.
and you had to choke a cat to connect to the internet. Do you remember that?
Oh, no kittens were harmed.
you had to
Connecting to the
you had
internet
to
for
su-
this.
okay, okay, let's leave the cats alone. We had to summon demons just to connect to the internet, and you can hear them screaming just to connect to the internet. It was such an interesting time. So okay, speaking of the old times, internet today is super fast, and yet building a Blazor application that runs in the browser, it really matters the speed. I saw you talking a lot about how small, how fast can I actually bring in. Why is that important? I know why it's important. When I see, why is it important that the
Oh yeah.
application is small and fast to load and all that? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll address that, but just quickly on the micro front end thing. This is an area that we are interested in and hearing people's
Nice.
experiences on. So if you have feedback, like trying to
Yes.
build micro front ends with Blazor or any framework, love to hear about it. Send it to us on GitHubs. Contact me on Twitter. Love to hear about your experiences. For performance and download size and load time, that first load of your app is obviously very, very important. There's a great data that shows how people will just leave your site if you don't show them your application within
Yep.
a certain amount of time. So you want
Yep.
the app to be snappy in terms of loading.
Yep.
With Blazor WebAssembly, obviously this is an issue because there's an inherent overhead to bring not only your application code, but a whole .NET runtime.
Framework. Yep, yep,
That
yep, yep.
runtime and the framework libraries with you to the client. So there is an overhead there, and we work
Mhm.
very hard to make that overhead as small as we can possibly make it.
Uh-huh.
The runtime that we ship is well, in .NET 5, the WebAssembly runtime itself was about 800 kilobytes after you had
Wow.
compressed
Uh-huh.
it down, which is
Mhm.
pretty incredible considering it's
Yep.
a whole .NET runtime. The whole
Yes.
app, including the framework libraries and like, a very basic Blazor application. If you did all the trimming and compressing, the smallest app you could build in .NET 5 was about 1.7 megabytes, I think, in
Megs.
terms of download
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
In .NET 6, it's better. We have better trimming capabilities in .NET 6. We even have the ability to, we've always been able to trim the managed code, like your
Uh-huh.
DLLs that come
Uh-huh.
down to the browser.
Yeah.
We can now also trim the runtime itself.
The actual
Um,
core.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah, we can rip out, like if you don't need globalization features, you can pull those out. If you don't, we don't need the debugging stuff, you can pull that stuff out. We can get the whole app down to just about a megabyte, like just slight. I really was hoping it
Nice.
would be just under a megabyte.
Just
It's
a
like
megabyte.
slightly over, but it's right there, which is great. So it's
Uh-huh.
smaller download size means faster load time. So
Yes.
that's all. That's all goodness. And we do all sorts of tricks to do that. We remove unused code. So we do analyze the app to see which code paths in the framework libraries in your application code that you're using, which ones you're not. We pull out
So
the
you're
ones you're not.
lazy loading, basically. You're pulling only what the app needs. That's it.
So lazy loading is also a trick we do. That's a little different. The linking
Nice.
is more like tree shaking in the JavaScript world, where you're doing
Yeah.
static analysis to remove unused code.
Yeah.
You can also lazy load. You can basically say, I've got this dependency over here, like this
But I'm not
binary,
using
and
it.
I'm
Yeah.
not using it
Yeah.
until I go to this page. Like when I go to slash do really
Nice.
important thing that involves big assembly, I'll
Yeah.
only load it then. So you can do that. You can kind of slice up the app into pieces and
Nice.
load it only when it's needed.
Nice.
We pre-compress all of your assets as part of publishing the app. So we'll broadly compress the runtime and the DLLs with the highest settings to get them as small as we possibly can.
Nice.
Yeah, and then the linking of the runtime was the new thing that we added in .NET 6. So with all that, we can take an app that would normally be multiple megabytes and shrink it down to just a meg. So that's
Nice.
for load performance. Blazor server doesn't have that problem with load
You
performance
don't have the
because
problem.
it's
Yeah, you
small.
already have everything. Yeah, that's right. So let me ask you this. Speaking of which, you must be dealing with a lot of like I feel like in terms of embracing WebAssembly and building another, using it to allow a different programming language other than JavaScript, to run on the browser. I feel like we're kind of you and your team are like the visionary vanguards when it comes to like the trailblazers because I saw a lot of attempts. Yeah, you're the trailblazers. Yeah, that's right. Nice. Pun intended. Okay, so what if, you know, you must be being at the head at the beginning and ahead of everybody. I know that I've seen attempts. People wanted to run Scala in the browser. People wanted to run Python in the browser. You're kind of opening the door for as an inspiration for all the other people that are excited about their programming languages to kind of run it in the browser. What's the biggest challenge that's facing the Blazor project today, technically?
I mean, that overhead, particularly for WebAssembly, that overhead
Yes.
of having to bring the runtime with you, and also having to deal with some of the limitations of WebAssembly itself,
Uh-huh.
matching that .NET semantic to what
With the
WebAssembly
WebAssembly.
offers can cause us some tricky things. Like there are certain runtime features that our .NET runtime needs to provide to enable compatibility with existing binaries that are a little bit harder to implement on WebAssembly. That can impact things like runtime performance or download size even.
Hmm.
For runtime performance, where you want your code to execute quickly,
Hmm.
we've had issues in the past where the runtime itself that we brought down was small, but it was also just doing IL interpretation. There's
Hmm.
no JIT on
Yeah.
WebAssembly. So that meant your code doesn't get that benefit of being just in time turned into native instructions so it
Yeah.
can run faster. So compared to JavaScript code execution or our normal JIT-based .NET runtimes, Blazor WebAssembly code execution was kind of slow.
Hmm.
We to a large extent addressed that in .NET 6 by introducing ahead of time compilation.
Hmm.
That's where you can
Hmm.
take your .NET code and just turn it into WebAssembly up front,
Yep.
and that
Yep.
makes it much faster. You don't have to JIT it because it's already WebAssembly. WebAssembly is the native instruction of the web platform.
Yep.
The trade-off there is the WebAssembly representation of your .NET code involves more WebAssembly instructions than the
Yep.
original .NET
It's hard
IO.
to read in the
Well,
Yeah.
it gets bigger as a result. You need
Yeah.
more WebAssembly to represent the same amount of .NET code that would live in a DLL. So your app gets larger. Like it actually bloats to, it can be like twice as big with ahead of time compilation. So you get way faster runtime execution, but now you're trading off load time. For some apps that makes sense. Like if you're trying to do CPU intensive stuff in a browser with .NET code, you're going to want AOT. If you don't need that, then don't use AOT because it'll just make your app larger and you're not going to, you don't need that runtime performance benefit. So those are the challenges that we have to deal with as the .NET team. And we have very smart people, a whole runtime team that's thinking about how can we run .NET code on WebAssembly really, really well. There's also standardization efforts that are continuing to evolve WebAssembly as a platform. So more things get lit up that enable us to do things better in our runtime itself, like handling of exceptions and dealing with the DOM and all that type of stuff. So there's, as browsers progress, we also get to move forward too. Those are some of the big things that come to mind, particularly in the WebAssembly space.
You always have to play catch up. You know, things are changing in the WebAssembly, you know, standardization. The browsers keep getting smarter and bigger and offer more capabilities. Do you remember when browsers started to offer outside of the box sound and video tags? Do you remember that? You know, that when I saw that, I was like, where's this going? This is going places. There's actually something
really
about
annoying ads that like
autoplay
videos.
and the X button is so small, you need a microscope to shut down I just want to read the article. Okay, take money. Just don't put that stuff. I'm not interested in renewing my car insurance. Thank you so much, sir. We've been trying to reach you. So okay, so these are the challenges. Tell me about the future of the web and the future of Blazor in the metaverse era.
Yeah,
This is a
sure.
little bit of a big question.
I'm not even gonna go there. I'm not even gonna try to go to the metaverse there. But so we will continue to evolve that tool chain for dealing with WebAssembly. WebAssembly will just keep getting better, smaller, faster, more capable. Apple finally got around to adding the support to Safari.
Finally.
Allow us to do multi-threading scenarios in the browser. They were kind of the last holdout. Now they're there. So we're looking at that again for .NET 7. That's been a long-standing ask. Nice. Better debugging. We kind of skipped a level with Blazor a bit in terms of platform abstractions. You can run .NET code on WebAssembly with the Blazor framework, but sometimes you just want to have like a .NET library that you use from a browser, and you don't need the component model. We have numerous teams internally at Microsoft that are interested in this, where they want to leverage some of their .NET investments for web app presences that they have. So we're gonna inject a layer there where we'll make it easier for you to just run some .NET code, whether Blazor is being used or not, whether you're using the component model. You can just run some .NET code on WebAssembly. So that's an area that we're looking at. There's also looking beyond the browser. Like, browsers are great. Yes, they have video and audio and a whole bunch of other capabilities now that make them very compelling. But sometimes you still need more than what the browser offers you, and you need full access to the native capabilities of your machine. For that, we're working in a partnership with the .NET MAUI team, which is our new multi-app platform UI stack for building UI that can run on Windows, Mac, iOS, Android,
mobile, desktop, anywhere, right?
Mobile, desktop. We're enabling you to run Blazor components in MAUI applications, native client applications. That will allow you as a web developer to use your web development skills, HTML, CSS for the UI, but your components, they don't run on WebAssembly. They run directly in the native .NET process. So they can do whatever the .NET platform can do. They can talk to the file system. They can deal with the network, and they can do whatever. You have full access to the device. So you can write native client apps using your Blazor .NET web development skills. That's something that's coming with .NET MAUI later this year. So that's also something we're working pretty hard on.
I asked a lot of people this question. Is Maui, Blazor meeting Xamarin in the middle, or is it a different thing than Xamarin? What,
That's a pretty good description. If you're coming from a Xamarin background,
yes,
You can
yes.
think of Maui as like the next
Mm,
evolution of Xamarin. It is
okay,
basically Xamarin V Next with more platform support, a more modern
okay,
architecture, but it has a
okay.
lot of stuff that's very familiar if you're used to Xamarin. And Blazor plus Maui is then bringing together the ASP.NET world with that
The power,
world
the
with
power.
native client development that has that lineage in Xamarin, but it's now been rebranded as .NET Maui. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it will. Those icons that you showed earlier of like all
Yeah,
the things you can do with .NET and C
there
Sharp.
will be
Like
also.
there's more stuff. Like you can use your skills to stay productive, whether you're coming from a web development background or if you're from a Xamarin background, you like XAML or WPF, and you like XAML. Maui has XAML support as well.
Nice.
It'll allow you to do pretty much whatever you want the way you want to do it.
Nice. I can't wait to see that. And also on the topic of the metaverse, right? There's a lot of investment in, mixed reality, augmented reality, and all that. If you can run, so this is the thing. C Sharp can build games, right? You can use the Unity,
Yeah,
framework to kind of build games and all that. Okay, that's one part. But you also within your augmented reality or mixed reality or virtual reality, you basically can, create apps and create entire universes around you. Do you see Blazor invading that space, or is it kind of wait a little and see how things pan out?
I think it's wait a little bit. I
You're
mean,
gonna
there
wait.
is a like an interesting question about say Maui and Hololens. Like, can
Yes,
I use Maui to
yes,
bring an application to Hololens, and how does
yes,
that work? Like, what is that model?
yes,
I don't know.
yes.
Like, I know that question has been raised. I don't know what the plans are there. Maybe there's a future there.
Maybe, yeah.
And
I,
wherever
I,
Maui goes, like Blazor will be able to be there. Basically, wherever the web platform is, Blazor will be there too. We're not just doing
this is
Maui
it.
with Blazor. Like we
Hmm.
have we have Blazor web view controls that we're shipping for WPF and for WinForms, so that you can leverage the web platform
Hmm.
pretty much wherever you want to.
Nice, nice. And I think like I've used the Oculus VR. I used a bunch of these. I'm super excited. I'm Mr. Inspector Gadget here. I love gadgets. I like to see how things work. And it looks like both worlds are trying to kind of meet each other in the middle because the people that are developing these systems, augmented reality and virtual reality, they're trying to make existing things that are already there presentable in the 2D world kind of way on the screen. They're trying to make this 3D. So they're trying to do that part from their side, but also because you're driving, I'll tell you what Blazor is beyond just the technology. You're driving simplification and a really easy and simple engineering experience. And if engineers, you're basically going to someone saying, if you're building a web application, automatically you know how to build mobile applications. Now imagine if you can say, if you're building a web applications, you're also building mobile applications, and you can also build in the, virtual reality and the metaverse. You can actually
Exactly.
develop
Yeah.
systems in there. So it's definitely everyone is still kind of scratching the surface on this. We don't know how this is going to pan out. My speculation, that's just a speculation. It doesn't represent anybody or anything. Is that I know that the next generation of people, that will start using technologies, they will be surprised that we have all these boxes around us to kind of work like the tower machine and the screens and monitors and all that. They'll be like, why are you using that? I have an eye, the lens. I put the lens on my eye, and now I have an entire world around me. Not a sad, dark Black Mirror kind of episode where people are like banned from being seeing everybody, but more like I don't need all of these things if the purpose of me actually working on a computer is to be able to interact with a system. I have that right here in my augmented reality. I have it in my eye as a glass or a HoloLens or whatever the case may be, and I can now interact with the world. I'm gonna miss the keyboard though. Do you remember when cell phones used to have keyboards?
I do.
Actual buttons, and then it
Hmm.
disappeared. I feel like this augmented reality is going into that direction, and then we're not going to have keyboards, and then people are going to look at these things. We're going to point at these things, be like, this is archaic, this is ancient technology that we used to use. I don't know. You never know with these things. Now, there's a couple of things for you just to, I wanted to share with the community and for the people watching us. Number one, the enterprise experience, right? So I talked to Daniel a little bit before of course, we talked a little bit before the session and all that. And I am planning to basically put together all my enterprise experience in terms of designing systems and all that kind of stuff into a little repository here, Daniel. I'm going to share it with people just so people see. I'm going to start putting some information there. So this is designing enterprise level systems. But this is how I write my books. I just put it out there on GitHub until people go. And the beautiful thing about this, just like the engineering standard, when I go on a project and start building something, it keeps getting bigger and bigger. Like I started this standard with a couple of chapters, and now look how big it is. And it has a Discord community behind it, and it just got. This is the beauty of open source, right? So the same thing, I'm doing the same thing with Blazor, right? I'm going to try to kind of gather all the experiences that I have, the problems that we ran into. You talked a little bit earlier about, okay, as a .NET team, we're not going to give you recipes, but I'm sort of an outsider somewhere in the middle. So I'm still friends with Daniel, and I'm talking to Daniel about all these cool things, but I'm also in the open source world where I'm actually interacting and building, systems out of it. I thought I can combine both worlds and put together a book, a reference, with, prescriptions for people. Some people might. The beautiful thing about prescriptions is that prescribed ways of doing something. You're basically giving someone a boilerplate, like it's something out of the box. Here's how I solve this problem. Evolve it, take it and go further with it, go do more with it. If you can do more with it, do so. There's that one part. And also the other thing, Daniel, is a Blazor community, right? I'm going to try to do my best to kind of connect with the Blazor community. Daniel is very
A
busy, so I'm
public
going to.
one, a
A
public
public one,
data community.
a
Yes.
public a public Blazor community. I'm going to share this with people. It's still at its infancy. It's still, let me share my screen here. It's still at its very beginning, and I'm going to share the link here for the community.
By the way, why are you showing that? I love that enterprise
Yes.
Blazor effort. Like I hear you know a few things about this. I hear you've built some enterprise applications with Blazor. You might have some experience. And I think it's great that you're doing that out in the open and sharing that
Yes.
knowledge.
Yes.
We do. I love when the community steps up like that and
Yes.
shares what they've learned, what they know. That just helps
Yes.
other people be successful as well. It's going to be great. And if there's things that come out of that you think we could change in
Yes.
the Blazor framework
That's it.
proper, like let's
That's
talk about those things.
that's the cycle, right? That's the cycle. Like a while ago, I'll show you a couple of things, but on this enterprise level Blazor systems, just for the people watching us, and you actually, my heart was beating with the rate of gravity. I'll tell you why. You went and said, so this is Blazor enterprise level. You went on the .NET conf, right? I was so, like, I didn't know what you're gonna do, and then you went out there and you said, "Does Microsoft use Blazor?" Of course we do.
Yeah.
And you went like this and you showed this app. And
Uh-huh.
I can't tell you, I was playing this on the big screen behind me. I turned off all the lights. I have these curtains that block the light, and I said, "Okay, I hope this goes well. I don't know what he's gonna do, but I hope this goes well." When it comes .NET Conf, it's like a holy time for me. Nobody talks to me. I want to see what's going on. And then you put this out there, and I was like, wait a second, how many people can we benefit? Okay, if you like this, if you like what you're seeing, if you like the applications, let me try and do my ultimate best to share my knowledge with the world, with everybody, so people know how to build their systems. And if they build their systems right, they'll be able to give us kind of feedback and tell us this is how the engineering standard came to be. I would put a pattern out there, and people come back to me and they say, this didn't work for us. I'll be like, how come it didn't work for us? Well, we're trying to do tracing, we're trying to do logging, we're trying to do all these things, right? So just so people understand, Daniel is at the core of the product, right? Actually, hold on a second. I'll show you something really nice. I'm sorry, Daniel. I want to show you everything. Why do you make me do that? You make me want to show you things. This is on you, sir. This is you.
It's for the good of everyone, Hassan. For the good of everyone.
So so a long time ago, I love the tech industry, right? I always, like to dig deeper into how an idea comes to reality and how a reality becomes an always feedback cycle that basically helps people, innovate and continue to add into the technology and make it better and better. I remember a while back I published something called the life cycle of technology. Let me show you this. You're gonna love this. This is maybe 2 years ago, and I draw that diagram. Right? Check this out. This is how technology come to be. You're sitting at the center here, my friend. Right? You're a visionary and a maker. You come up with the vision. Right? You and Steve Sanderson and your team are sitting right there at the midst of it. Right? And then there's this community. This is where I come in and say, let me give me this technology and let me go advocate for it and let me build great things with it. And then an industry adaptation happens at this circle here. Like people start saying, okay, we are a XYZ company and we are gonna make Blazor our exclusive technology for building our software. So there's that industry adaptation. And then there are people that will consume from that industry, like people who just hired by these companies. They never heard of Blazor, not interested, but the company that I'm working is using Blazor, so I'm gonna be using Blazor, right? And then at the very end, the products that come out of that, that's at the very, very edge, all the way on the outside. These are the people that consume that technology in the form of a product. So if I'm building Intract, the people that are using Intract to kind of manage their insider trading stuff, that's the consumers at the very, very end of that. So I don't know, just I need to find more hobbies. I'm really interested in the tech industry. I try to kind of slice it down and see what's going on, but this is where you are. And you
I would also point out that there are some really nice feedback loops here. Like,
yeah.
yes, I help to determine direction for what we're going to do with Blazor, but a
Mhm.
lot of that isn't just like, me or Sanderson or someone sitting in a room and thinking deep thoughts and coming up with stuff. A lot of that is talking with folks like you, folks in the
Community.
.NET community,
Yep.
listening
Yep.
on GitHub,
Yep.
gleaning those ideas. There are a lot of visionaries that are just doing their day job and they've got a good idea and
Yep.
they share it with us, and we just end up being a conduit for those ideas into the platform. So
You
it's
have
a
to
team
support
effort,
it.
I guess is what I'm saying.
It
It's a
is.
team
It
effort.
is. It definitely is. This is going back and forth. Like if you don't see how the community that so you're making it, and if the community doesn't see how how to use it, there will be no industry adaptation, and the industry could go back to the community. Have you ever seen an engineer going back to Stack Overflow say, "Hey guys, I'm trying to use this technology, it's not working." That's someone in the industry realm using the technology and going back to the community saying this is not working, and then
Yeah.
someone in the community will jump in and say, hey Daniel, this guy from XYZ company, they're not able to do it. What should we do? And so on and so forth. The communication. That's the beautiful thing about a community is that people get to talk, both ways, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mr. Daniel Roth, you are, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, sir, and I really appreciate the really hard work that you and your team put together into the technology, and it just makes my heart happy to just get an inspiration and see people like that. You should be proud, and at the best, as a community, as the people that are working with us and people that are building software with us, you wouldn't believe. Like I know of people at every corner of the earth that are using Blazor and trying to incorporate it, especially when I'm recommending it as part of, okay, you can build it in React, but Blazor is really cool, go ahead and try it out. We get that feedback, we communicate with each other. I appreciate your support. Just so you guys understand, even at my hardest times building an enterprise application for the first time with a technology that I've never used before, every time I reached to Daniel, he answered. Every time I tried to say, hey, Daniel, we're stuck at this. What are we going to do? What are we, how are we going to solve this? He was there. Interact couldn't have happened without the hard work of the software engineers and the business people that were working with us. Christine Mayberry, she was really, really supportive, but also a core engineering team that is always willing to answer any questions and kind of get us out of the gutter. Just help us, come out and make it happen. I appreciate you, sir. Any last remarks?
Thank you.
Anything you
So,
want
I
to
mean, that
say?
very kind, and thank you for pushing through, being one of our, a pioneer
I
in the
appreciate you
Blazor
for that.
world,
Yeah.
helping us make the product better, being patient with some of Blazor's early rough edges. Like that, the feedback that you then gave us was what helped Blazor then become more successful, more polished, more beneficial to a wider set of people. We live, at least I live, for trying to help people be successful building software, and it's so gratifying to see when people are able to use these tools, these frameworks, to get great stuff done. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to seeing your
Yes.
enterprise content.
Yes.
I'll be hanging out on the Discord channel
Yes,
and
please.
chatting with folks. So feel free to join us there. We'd love to hear your stories as well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you so much, sir. And for people watching us, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section. And as usual, don't forget to what, Daniel? Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Right? I'll see you in another video. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate